So thank you for joining in. My name is Fredrik Forslund. I'm joining you from Stockholm, Sweden. I've been in the industry for 20 years, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of those insights. With me today, I have my esteemed colleague at Blanco, Russ Ernst. Welcome, Russ.
Hey, Fredrik. And I'll do a brief introduction as well. And as Fredrik mentioned, my name is Russ Ernst. I'm the Chief Technology here at Blanco. I've been with the company for about 7 years now, and I'm responsible for setting the product strategy and then having that in alignment with the corporate go-to-market strategy. And then I have the development resources available to execute on that strategy. And I'm dialing in from sunny Phoenix, Arizona, where I live with my 3 kids and my very lazy but lovable cat named Mint. And I really look forward to today's discussion.
Fantastic. And I'm loving the Christmas tree in the background. And I'm happy to say that we have some Christmas flowers here in my background as well.
Yes.
We're all heading towards the holidays. And then finally, but not least, Richard, you have a very strong track record. So let us hear a little bit about everything that you have done.
Sure, Fredrik. Thank you. Hi, I'm Richard Steenan. I'm a industry analyst, though for a short time, couple of years, I joined my colleagues here at Blanco, and that was several years ago. But as a industry analyst, I've been covering the IT security space for 22 years. And prior to that, at PwC, I had about 5 years experience as a security practitioner.
Yes, and you're constantly seen on TV all over the world. I've seen a number of those broadcasts myself, as well as being keynote in many different cybersecurity gatherings. But it's a special reason also that the 3 of us are here today, because we have been working on a project. And Richard, I'll let you share a little bit about the book that we have written together.
Yeah, it's very exciting that we are a little over a week away from the book hitting stores and being available on Amazon. Its title is Net Zeros and Ones, How Data Erasure Promotes Sustainability, Privacy, and Security. And this is, a book that, as you know, we've been working on for over 2 years, in just gathering input from some of the pioneers of the space, as well as watching some of the regulatory requirements are coming down the pike. And basically, our initial title for it was a handbook for data erasure. And we believe a practitioner could use this as their guide to building a data erasure policy, as well as an data information policy that kind of is the overarching requirement if you're actually going to manage your data, and to us, most importantly, your data at the end of life.
Fantastic. And about 10% of you that have joined us today will actually walk away with the book. The 51st of about 500 that has registered will be getting a copy sent home to your mailboxes. So hopefully that will come in time for Christmas. But let's kick off the discussion. So we want you to take away from this first half hour a basic, up-to-date understanding of what is data sanitization and why is it relevant. So if I start with you, Russ, what is data sanitization to you? What would you like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think that's the best way to really start off this discussion, because data sanitization is so much more than just data erasure, right? And especially when we're thinking about all the different aspects of why it's important to have a clean slate when it comes to your most protected asset in the organization, which is your data. And there are many different ways to achieve this, but it's most important to walk away with the base definition of what is data sanitization, and that's as described by Gartner. It's the act of the data erasure itself the verification that the erasure took place, and then a report on what exactly happened and how that erasure took place. So without those three steps, you don't really have a true sanitization. And then that sanitization can take place in many different ways, but the two main ways would be a software-based data sanitization, which leaves the asset available for, if this is on a whole media asset, that leaves that asset available again to go back into the circular economy, or doing your data sanitization through physical destruction, destroying the media where that data is being stored. So that's kind of the general overview, but of course, many different reasons why data sanitization is important that we can continue to talk about through today's discussion.
Excellent introduction. Yes, Richard?
Just a quick addition to Gartner's definition, because of course I have to chime in when Gartner's mentioned, and that is the kind of the immutable aspect of that report. Because it's very simple for an auditor to come in and say, hey, you lost a laptop, but you claim it was after the data was erased. Show us a report. If you just show them a typewritten or a Word doc, how does the auditor know that Word doc hasn't been put together after the fact, just so that they don't fall into disclosure law requirements? And that's if you create a hard PDF or some other form and record a hash of some sort or digital signature of that document to show that it was not tampered with after the fact. So a really critical step of that recording function of data sanitization.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, Richard, because that's really what sets the difference between a consumer-based data erasure, right, which there are free tools available that I think everyone should be, investigating for their own, personal data, versus enterprise grade at scale data erasure as part of an overarching data sanitization policy, and then maintaining that the tenets of pure data sanitization is having that auditable audit trail for that act.
And I'm really glad you bring these things up. And if I just reflect on the 20 years in the industry that I have had the fortune to experience, it has always been erase, report, and audit as the three key things to take away from this kind of process. And we'll clarify a few other things that we know is important to think about and also to be aware of. But let's check in with the audience while we are kicking things off. And we have a poll question that will come up on your screens. I'll read out the question, and then please fill in what's closest to your hearts. But thinking about erasing data for good as the title for this series of podcasts or webinars, what triggers would create the need for data erasure, data sanitization in your business? What is it that is the driving force when you think about this in your environment, in your region, since we have people from all over the world, in your industry? We have the options here. Donating used IT equipment, is that the trigger? Reselling used IT equipment, is that something that you're already doing to also gain our return on investment simply? Removing data for security concerns, mainly security driven. Automating IT processes, i.e. trying to capture as much of security processes when you're managing your assets into automated processes. And then finally, but maybe most importantly, greener processes, sustainability, and finding that alternative to destroying. Let us know which one is closest to your heart, and we are ready to close the poll, I think. Security concerns comes in with a whopping 74.4%. That is good to see. And to be frank here, that is the foundation that we're standing on. That's why this technology, once upon a time, was developed. And that is also the absolute most important requirement. And Richard, if I turn to you, thinking about security concerns and security references, standards, frameworks, what comes to mind, and what should we be aware of when it comes to that aspect of data sanitization?
Yeah, Frederick, when I think of security in general, and when I talk to any CIO or CISO or digital transformation expert, they all come to the same conclusion that the only purpose for a security program in the first place is to protect the data. So all the network stuff, all the GRC stuff, all the identity security that you build in, it's all to protect the data, right? We're not as concerned about the physical hardware or keeping people out of our offices, things like that. It's because those attacks target the data. My view has always been that data sanitization is the ultimate protection, right? If the data doesn't exist, even you can't access it anymore, then you don't have to spend money on all those other layers of defenses. And I think it works into every compliance regime, from ITIL to COBIT to ISO, frameworks such as NIST, who spend a lot of time writing corollaries to their famous cybersecurity framework that defines the data sanitization process. And if you think about it, data, and we write about this in the book, data is just exploding in volume, right? And it's helped along lately by the introduction of close to 50 billion IoT devices that are generating data. And all that data gets stored. Some of it has security concerns about it, right? CCTV cameras, there might be images on it, or just sensors from your processes in your plants. That data could be important to an industrial spy. So therefore, not leaving it around forever and protecting and paying to store it and paying to put controls over it or encrypt it. As soon as you encrypt it, then you've got to pay for the key management processes to make sure those keys are still good years from now. Just wipe that out at some end of life that's allowable within whatever regulatory your regime is in. And it could be, a lot of government agencies, there is no end of life for data. They must keep it forever, as I discovered when I looked into the U.S. State Department's requirements for data retention. But financial institutions, usually it's like a 7-year retention period. And after that, you can start getting rid of all those old statements, which for a lot of us would still have critical information about our bank accounts, which don't switch that often. So big concern. Security is number one to me, of course.
So a lot of things to keep track of, but there is good advice and guidance to get in recent frameworks that have been released, etc. Russ, if we look back on history here and we talk about just vocabulary, scrubbing, wiping, purging, deleting, erasing, could you give us some clarity here what we should think about all these different terms?
Oh goodness! I mean, that's how much time do we have for the rest of the session, right? So
15 minutes.
So the challenge here is to think about what is that act of the erasure itself, right? And it's unfortunate that we've been trained over and over again as users to think, that when you're erasing something, that it should be permanent, and yet what's the first option you see in most applications, or even running your Windows desktop, if you hover over that recycle bin, is an option to bring it back. So if you have an option to restore data, then the data actually hasn't been erased. And it's very misleading too, because when you click on a single file to erase it, it will literally say that you're getting rid of this file for good, and yet you have the option immediately to bring it back. And so it's not a real true erasure. So all these comments about whether it's a wipe or a race or whatnot, and so it really comes down to, are you using an established algorithm that it has been proven to eliminate that data reliably and irretrievably, and whether that's being done via a cryptographic erasure or that's being done through a software-based data overwrite to remove that data and make it inaccessible by any kind of modern means, then that's what a true erasure should be. And those are defined by some of the leading compliance statutes that are out there. Leading those would be the NIST 800-88, right? That I'm sure we'll spend some time talking about. But there are also up and coming ones as these are continually evolving specifications, and IEEE is having an updated specification as well that is meant to be the successor to NIST. And so it's really incumbent upon large organizations and data security professionals to stay on top of this and make sure that you're partnering with the right groups that are providing this as a service, or that you're using industry tools that do provide a true software-based data sanitization, as we defined at the beginning of this.
And I'm going to follow up on one more dimension there. When we talk about security and the concerns, can we reach purge level, and can we have 100% verification if that is a requirement from an internal security policy, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, depending on the different types of storage media that are out there, it is possible to achieve a NIST purge level on nearly every major mainstream storage media, right? And again, this is what's so challenging about this, is that data isn't always written the same way to different storage media, right? The way that data was written to, your legacy magnetic-based, spinning platter storage media is very different than the way that data is written to SSD media today. And so it requires a different type of algorithm to achieve a purge level erasure for the different storage media. And this is where it gets, there are a lot of misconceptions that are out there about destroying data, and even misconceptions around physical destruction, right? And so it might, everyone has seen those images when you search for data erasure, just the image of like a hammer and a hard drive, right? But realistically, even that isn't secure when you're talking about data that's stored to an SSD, where by the NIST standard and by other modern standards, you have to shred that drive down to 2 millimeters in order to achieve pure data sanitization for physically destroying that media. And so it really is dependent on all the different media types that are out there.
Excellent comments. The runner-up in the poll we saw was implementing greener process, i.e. striving for sustainability and circular IT. Richard, as the lead author of the book, you also interviewed a lot of key stakeholders in industry around the world. What are some of the reflections that you have on how important the sustainability part is here, and how can sustainability and security still work hand in hand?
Yeah, in all honesty, when you and Russ wanted me to introduce sustainability as major theme in the book, I had my doubts. I know that there's a sustainable aspect to reusing any device, but especially electronic devices. You don't want to end up in landfills. But in interviewing the three major ITADs, IT asset disposition companies, one in each of the three major markets, so Australia, Asia Pac, Europe, and the United States, I was really surprised to learn that sustainability is actually the driving force for them for getting new customers and seeing new discipline involved in recycling IT assets. Because for the longest time, as actually, if you go way back, it was let's extract the valuable, gold and silver and rare earths from these devices, and that would pay the recycler for all their activity. But over time, as the manufacturers stopped putting that stuff in, it came down to, hey, we're going to extract value from all these devices by cleaning them, erasing them, and then refurbishing them and reselling them. And sometimes they share that revenue gained from that back with the customer, or sometimes they just have acquired it from the customer for a price, which was a great drive. No driver better than an economic one. But now, thanks in part to just more consciousness of, we shouldn't be throwing this stuff away, as well as regulations, specifically coming out of Europe, that are requiring this to happen. Now it's becoming a major driver. And I think that's, thanks to you two, really made our book topical and at the right time to come out.
Yeah, it's a clear trend when you're interacting with partners, customers, stakeholders around the world that this is getting a lot of momentum in corporate IT agendas in general. Russ, how much do you come across this topic when you are out and spending time at industry events, etc.?
It certainly comes up a lot. I would say that the number one driver in the market today is around compliance, right? And that industries, corporations are meeting a compliance requirement for having a data sanitization policy for their assets at end of life and through their data through life, through their organization. But the fastest rising or the fastest growing concern is, just as Richard stated, is around a sustainability standpoint. And I think we've all heard the term ESG, the environmental, social, and governance reporting that's going on. We're all aware of large organizations issuing carbon neutrality reports or carbon neutrality targets. And those targets are, you hear them in the news around anything from 2030, 2040. That's coming around sooner rather than later. And so organizations are right now looking at all these different aspects of how to achieve that carbon neutrality, as well as seeing an increased number of new requirements around sustainability. And it's not necessarily around sustainability targets, but it's around sustainability reporting, right? And you're seeing some things in the news around the SEC providing these within the next year, or different other regions throughout the world. And I think this is what's going to be really interesting going into 2023, is that there's going to be more focus on sustainability. There's going to be more focus, not necessarily, again, on hitting targets, but really about transparency and having a lot more formal understanding of how to report on sustainability and being able to report on your own corporate's sustainability targets.
And one clear example, one of the strongest security environments has always been the big data centers, the hyperscalers, where there has been meticulous security on all different levels, and where historically shredding drives have been a bit of a default. But lately, we've seen great initiatives from hyperscalers all over the world, where they are processing erasure through software, reusing, running proper purge processes, verifications, but just seeing that, and also the how much it actually impacts. We're talking millions of drives coming from those kind of environments. So it's a very strong sign of the times that we're seeing the trend also in that segment as a good indicator. Richard, if we continue a little bit of reminiscing on history, I say DOD. What say you?
In the early days, and especially after Peter Gutman looked at hard drives with a very interesting mechanical balance system to measure the actual magnetic charge on each portion of a hard drive, he came back and said, you know what, I can read these even after you've overwritten them. So therefore you have to overwrite them 32 times, which in a modern hard drive today might take a week to do and would destroy the hard drive in the process. The militaries around the world, Netherlands and the US, most frequently that I've seen out there, came up with various schemes, and they started with the US DoD spec called for 7 overwrites. But over time, they deprecated that, and as did Peter Gutman, and they came down to the NIST requirement that a single solid overwrite is good enough, but people will still use 3. So one random, one all ones or zeros, and another random, some mix of those 3. And that's what I see being used most often. And you shouldn't use the DoD standard at all because they don't use it anymore.
That's a very good conclusion. I think we've covered a lot of ground to establish some basics. So maybe if we put up a screen showing what's to come as next steps, and then we can comment a little bit together on what we see there. But this is the first webinar in a series, and we'll continue with additional topics. We're here from great speakers, and some of the topics that we have touched upon today, as automation, sustainability, regulatory compliance, will be further explored and underlined. So this is what to come, and make sure that you're signed up to get the full experience and all takeaways. But we still have a couple of minutes before we close this first session. Russ, what would you like to send off the audience with when it comes to key tips and insights?
Well, I'm just so excited about where this industry is going, and I'm really excited about this series of webinars that are upcoming, and especially that last topic. We talk a lot about compliance, and we talk a lot about sustainability and data security. These are all very, very important topics. The automation topic is one I think that needs to get a lot more visibility. So I'm really happy that we have that as a standalone topic, because I do think one of the biggest misconceptions in the market is that data sanitization is too cumbersome, that it takes too much effort. And we're really going to be going into a lot of detail in that session to dispel those misconceptions and talk about how really easy it is to implement and integrate as part of any kind of modern business process management workflow. So it's really as easy as can be once it's implemented. So I'm really happy that that's included in this group of webinars.
Excellent comment. Thank you very much, Russ. Richard, over to you for a closing comment.
The most fun I had in researching and writing the book was looking at future data storage requirements. And lo and behold, the people who are developing those are only thinking about capacity and read and write times, and not thinking about, effective erasure down the road. So anything from cool technologies like thermally enhanced disk drives, actually heat up the surface of the disk drive to reduce the resistance to being magnetized. How are you going to erase those? And there's another corollary to that, which is microwave assisted storage, tremendous densities on spinning drives. And of course, SSDs are just following that path, right, to smaller and smaller scales. Someday there'll be quantum storage. And it's important to think of those as you're thinking about moving to new platforms. Think about how you're going to be able to sanitize those platforms later, and hopefully not end up with pure physical destruction.
i.e., think about the end at the beginning. So we'll have some good, mind-blowing insights from those chapters. And remember, all of you that have registered as the first 50 will receive a book also in your mail. So hopefully in time for Christmas. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Russ. This was a great first discussion together. And I'm already looking forward to the next sessions. So thanks everyone for joining from all over the world, and over and out for today.
Thank you, everyone.